Welcome to the Regeneration Collective podcast, the next UN Visions for a Regenerative Future. I'm Silke von Brockhausen, a UN insider with 18 years across more than a dozen UN missions and founder of the Regeneration Collective. In this special fireside chat, I'm joined by two extraordinary women, Jyoti and Alexandra Pimor, each a bridge between worlds, weaving ancestral wisdom and systemic transformation. Together, we explore what it means to remember the story of origin, of humanity, of the earth, and of the United Nations itself. Why does the story of origin matter? From an indigenous and regenerative lens, origin stories hold the codes of purpose. They remind us who we are and what we're here to serve. As the UN stands at a crossroads in its 80th year, can we remember its founding impulse and root its future in reciprocity, unity, and care for all life? Three women from three continents, a spiritual elder, a legal innovator, and a systems practitioner coming together around one shared question. How can we embrace these times as we, the people, as stewards of life? I'm very, very honored to have with me today Jyoti, who is an internationally respected spiritual teacher and bridge builder between ancestral traditions and modern systems change. As vision keeper of the fountain, she has dedicated her life to restoring balance between humanity and the earth through sacred reciprocity and unity. She helped convene the International Council of 13 Indigenous Grandmothers and the Mother Earth Delegation of United Indigenous Nations, and works closely with the Cagaba Mamas in Colombia on the Sun Project to remember the Golden Body. Her mission to return humanity to a sacred, reciprocal relationship with Earth as the foundation for a thriving future. And it is also a pleasure to welcome back Alexandra Pimor to this podcast. She first joined us in episode 6 for a conversation on nature on the board and the rights of nature movement, which continues to inspire many listeners. He is an earth lawyer, legal scholar, and systems thinker working at the frontier of regenerative governance. As director of nature governance at the Earth Law Center, she leads the pioneering Nature on the Board initiative, bringing the rights of nature into corporate and institutional decision-making. She served as one of the first proxies for nature at the UK company Faith in Nature and mentors a global network of nature proxies through the Dandelion Fellowship. Her work invites us to reimagine law and governance as living systems that serve all life. So without further ado, welcome both of you to this little fireside chat.
Thank you for having us. It's such an honor.
Thank you,
And I
Silke.
love that we're spread across 3 continents, or at least our origin. I want to dive right back into origin. As a matter of fact, as already mentioned, it's so important to remember where we are from and where the institutions that serve us are rooted in. Jyoti, in our little pre-discussion, you mentioned that you are aware of the story of the UN, where it came from. And I would like to ask you to share what this story of origin is and why it even matters to it.
Well, I think it's a first good question to start with in our fireside chat, origin, because we're in a moment of prophecy right now. And that moment is taking us back to origin. It's taking us back to an original way of life that was given to us by Mother Earth herself and given the protocol of care of life to the original caretakers. And that strand, that has been brought from the original days, is been brought unbroken to this point in time that we're sitting in there now. And now we're sitting at the world table, and it's time for the prophecy that's activating what they call a new dawn. And so we must really still ourselves and deeply listen so that we can allow ourselves to be returned to an original way of life that then allows our hearts to open and our authenticity to carry our story. And it's a world story we're all a part of. So as we start to do this, I think it's really important to take our first step in deep breath and really commit to a deep listening process that's not guided by our minds, but instructed by our hearts, and the soul of this Mother Earth herself is now speaking loudly to each and every one of us. So when you and I and Allie started talking about the UN, we started talking about some of this, then what's the UN's origin? And I had remembered, because I'm an elder, so, my memory does very different things for me these days, keeps me humble. But I had remembered someone reporting to me that original vision that founded the UN, and it felt so heart aligned with the impulse of life I walk with and the instructions I am carrying out as I listen deeply. But I couldn't get a hold of these couple of people that this discussion, because I only had a few days. So I started researching it myself and I'll put the question out there. And this is what I found. So I'll just report it back to you in this way. What I found is that in 1945, there was a great movement that took something and put it in motion that was a response to the millions and millions of lives that had been lost in these world wars. We had a heart-driven need to really create something that would help us walk forward with more regard for life. And so what I loved when I found this, it said the spiritual vision for the UN was rooted in universal principles of peace, human rights, and dignity, that a better world required both material growth and spiritual consciousness. And Dag Hammarskjöld, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, he was the second UN Secretary General. He viewed the UN as an instrument of faith, and he said it would be a reflection of a heavenly vision, because we must go forward to seek for freedom and to bring a prohibition of the use of force. That was the original vision that I could find, and that was what resonated with my heart when I first heard that story. So I think if we start to look at this moment of something falling down so the origin can move itself forward again, then it's important to really revisit that vision and see what steps do we need to take, and not make them from our minds at all, but really listen deeply through that heart instruction. What steps do we need to take to actualize the origin of the UN, to restore it back to its original state?
It's so inspiring, and it helps me remember also why I joined this great organization, and it's fully aligned with my intention of why I put energy into my work and try to move things forward. And I feel, this is something we should always have somewhere at a board in every room, or remind ourselves also at meetings, just to also ensure that we're all aligned and find our purpose again, that often gets lost in the hectic and the stress and the pressure we are in. And that alone would already help. But Ali, is anything coming up for you when you listen to these beautiful stories from the origin of the UN?
Yes, a great deal, actually. I am paying attention to the words that are being used here in particular, the UN as a spiritual endeavor, and, that it's about faith. For about 20 years of researching the European Union, particularly looking at the theory of integration of the European Union, the same words appear at the origin of the creation of the European Union, 1949. Both the UN and both the Council of Europe and then the European Union were created as a direct response to the horrors of the Second World War, right? And they were all anchored and entrenched in a desire to practice peace. So the words spiritual and the words faith, at least from my own research, it was clear that it was not about religion. And I think it is important to make that distinction here, because a lot of people still, put spirituality and religion in the same basket. Religion is, to my mind, institutionalized, and, it's dogma, and it's community. You come together and you follow a particular path. Spirituality is everything. It's the quality of having spirit, of being spiritual. And we are all spiritual in that sense. And in the French sense, it is the mind, not the cerebral mind, but the mind, l'esprit. So from the European Union perspective, this was made very clear, because the Council of Europe as well. In the statutes, it is stated that it is the first spiritual step. And Robert Schuman also mentioned it in the construction of Europe, that it is a spiritual endeavor. It is a spiritual adventure because it is about the spirit of peace. It is about the spirit of brotherhood. It is about the spirit of life. And the faith here is faith in our ability as human beings to be what we need to be to thrive. It's not just faith in a god or a goddess. It's faith in life. So this is what is really coming up to me when I think about this. And if we're going a bit deeper in the words, we think about United Nations. Nations means peoples, right? And it's about really all of us coming together under this banner of unity. And there is nothing that reflects unity more than the earth as one being. We are originated from the earth. We are of the earth. We didn't create the earth. She created us. So as nations, when we come together united, we must follow the teachings and the wisdom of the earth. And when you think about it, that she's about 4.5 billion years old. And we are, as the modern human species, we have arrived 6,000 years ago. There's over 4 billion years of ecological balance we have to learn, because in the very small time that we have arrived, we have really made a mess of things. So we have to learn.
And we have to unlearn to learn, right? And I think it's important in this level of our discussion that in order for that to happen, what Ali just spoke so brilliantly about, we've got to bring the nation, all nations at the table, right? So tree nations,
Yes.
water nations, mountain nations, these are the different kinds of nations of the earth that need to have a voice at this table. And our ancestral wisdom is a global nation that's cared for life and is still caring for life, even in the midst of a war on nature that's already in motion.
Can you maybe elaborate a little what you mean with tree nations and water nations? That would be interesting to
I think
hear.
Ali you can probably touch on that better than me, because it's really about, a river. River is a being. It needs its rights too. When we severed our relationship with the earth herself, we lost that understanding. So as we come back to restore that broken connection with earth herself, the mother, she's our mother, then we come back to hear and feel into her creation, and we get to meet all of her nations, the nations that thrive, the tree nations, the ones that bring us air, the water nations, the ones that seed life. I could keep going on, but Ali, why don't you touch on this, because you've done so much work for the rights of nature.
I think you've already expressed it so beautifully here. And just to expand on this, as Jyoti said, is from a rights of nature perspective, the whole of the earth is a living entity. She is alive. I'm using she. I know that for many people it would be, it or he or whatever, but for me it's she, because I see her as Pachamama. I see her as Mother Earth, because she has given us life, and she has given life to absolutely everything. Every single thing that is of this earth is alive. Now, from an anthropocentric perspective, we think that we know what life is all about, which is it's anthropocentric, it's human-centered, it's from our human perspective. But like I said, we've arrived only 6,000 years ago in a 24-hour framework. We've arrived 6 seconds before midnight, literally. So we are not the pinnacle. We are one other life on this earth. Trees are communities, rivers are communities. The land is the law, essentially, as well. We, as human beings, have created a system whereby we've separated ourselves from everything else. We have been enacting a story of dominion, a story of superiority, a story of separation, when in reality, we are completely and utterly dependent on the earth. I mean, the clothes that we are wearing, the house in which I am, safe, sofa on which I am sitting, all of this is made of the bounty of the earth. The food that I eat, the food that every single one of us is eating, we are all dependent on the earth. Every single business on this planet is dependent on the earth. There is nothing that is not of the earth. But we have lost all sense of respect and equilibrium and reciprocity. We are not listening to the wisdom of all of these different entities that are alive and that are supporting us as well, all of our kin. So essentially, when we say all of the nations, we mean human, more than human, beyond human. Okay, it's very anthropocentric because it's all starting from the human perspective, but it's the whole of life, the whole community of life. And all of these have to be able to, as Jyoti said, have a seat and a voice and a vote at the table that we have created, because that it is at that table that we have also made the decisions that destroy the earth. It is therefore at that table that we need to make decisions that restore, that repair, that regenerate, that reclaim life. We have to reclaim our place in the community of life. And it's not at the top of the pyramid. It's within the cycle of life.
And we can see ourselves more as
all
stewards.
nations.
But I resonate so much with this vision of bringing all of this back on the table, and also understanding that we need the ecosystem and Mother Nature more than she does need us. And yet we're on this path of self-destruction, and I see spending defense increasing. I see still so much violence, human rights violations, and everything that does not fit into this original vision for how we want to engage with each other in relationship as United Nations. And I also see that many of the stakeholders would say we still need violence to create peace on this planet. We have the right to exploit the resources as we need them. And I don't see an end to this cycle. So I'm just wondering, how can we move the rudder to the right direction? What are your thoughts?
I have many thoughts. So, I don't know, shall I start? Okay. I'm going to pick up on what you said, Silke, about, not seeing the end of this cycle of destruction. I'm sorry about the noise in the background. It's, I have 2 teenagers downstairs who are doing their chores now. But I am thinking about them as I am answering this question now, because earlier on, one of my children came to me in despair because she said, what's the point of all of this? What's the point of going to school? But mostly, what's the point of going to school to so-called get a job when you see the state of this world? What is my future? I have 2 teenagers who are genuinely anxious about the future. Mm-hmm. And they are not the only ones. And even in the work that I do, I must admit, I often wonder, does it make any difference? And then I'm reminded of my mother. I'm reminded of the mother of my mother and the mothers that came before. They did what they had to do. They may not have seen the results, but I'm still the result of their fights. I'm still the result of their survival. I'm still the result of all the choices that they have made towards life. And so I look at what we are doing now, and everything around us looks really dire. I must admit, I've felt incredibly hurt those past few days as I don't usually look at the news, but for some reason it started, feeding through my Instagram, and I was not feeling good at all. But I couldn't look away because I had to witness, and I had to be reminded what I am doing it for, who I am doing it for. And it's for all of us, those of us who are in those positions of privilege where we can actually wonder, is this even worth it? There are all of those who are literally facing death right there. Mm-hmm. And they're still fighting. Life calls life. That's it. And so for those of us who are in those privileged positions, our job, our role is to keep positive. And I don't mean by that everything is rosy, everything is perfect. What I mean is that we need to keep on looking towards the vision that will take us forward towards a better reality, the best version of the world that we can co-create. Otherwise, we might as well give up. And here's the thing. I'm not going to give up, because that would be dishonoring my mother, because may she rest in peace. She literally gave me, a legacy of happiness. She struggles for me to be happy. The majority of parents do that for their children. We are literally the caretakers of the next generations. Mm-hmm. We have to be positive in the sense that we have to look forward to what can work. And the young ones, we have to listen to them. I talking to my daughter earlier on again. She was completely dismembering the whole school system. I was like, but you still have to go to school for all of these reasons. And she said, yeah, okay. Now tell me about this in the grander scheme of things. How does this even fit in? And I had to say, the school system is not even equipped for that. The UN is not equipped for what we want it to do today. Our institutions are not equipped, but we are, because we are the human beings. We have to change the narrative, because in the sense that we have to change the way we look at things. We are not in service to the systems that we have created. They were created for a purpose. And if that purpose is not for life, then it is obsolete. We are the ones within those systems that can make the difference. We are the ones who have to change. The statutes of the Council of Europe states that war began in the minds of men, and it is in the minds of men that peace shall be found. I'm paraphrasing badly, but this is the gist of it. Everything that has been created on this earth has come from the minds of human beings. Everything that is man-made has been from us. We have been dreaming those things. We fly in the sky. Centuries ago, that was seen as like completely ridiculous. We drive in super fast cars. That was seen as absolutely impossible. We've made the impossible possible. We've made the impossible possible. So the advice that I gave my daughter was quite simple. You know what you don't want. Fair enough. At that stage, you need to look for the thing that will stop you from spiraling into the abyss. Stop with the panic. Stop freaking out. And then look at what you can do about it. So we have a duty to look at what we can do now. It's not enough. It's not enough for us to say that I can't do anything, that whatever I'm doing is a tiny little drop in the ocean, but the ocean is made of drops of water. We are the ocean.
Beautiful. We should never stop dreaming.
And what that stirs in me is that we've got to wake up and dream a new dream. And in order to do that, because as I was listening to some of the questions, Silke, you were putting out and where we were, the deal is this: we've got to take a moment and do some of that deep, deep listening so that we can really hear the new dream. And we have to step back in order to do that, to look at a whole system rather than this myopic focus on materialism that created domination and started to cut us from life itself. And we put that in motion. So we've got to come back to ourselves. We've got to remind ourselves we are the ones that put it in motion. We, the people, And when you come back from that and you start to look at that whole system, you start to get different information. You find out that this Mother Earth goes through 26,000-year cycles, that she's completing a 26,000-year cycle right now. And it's been spoken about by most of the spiritual paths around this planet from all different nations, speaking the same words, which were, the way I saw it in India when I was on pilgrimages there. It was on their sacred, and in their ashrams, a clock would be on the wall. And from 12 to 1 was 2,500 years. And from 1 to 2 was 2,500 years. And so it went to 26,000 years. And that very last sliver in India, they call that the Kali Yuga. That's when what the Kogi call it, or the Kagava, in their prophecy of the eagle condor, they say the ending is falling into the beginning in 2026. This is that Kali Yuga. We're finishing up that Kali Yuga, the time of the ending of a 26,000-year cycle. And this is the 6th extinction that the mother has gone through. So she's been through this cycle 5 other times, probably even more than that, but those are the ones we're recording. So that tells us a different way of responding to the whole system. If I have the understanding that it's not about something went wrong, so I need to find out what went wrong and fix it, I've got to make somebody else blame somebody else, guilt somebody else, stir up more fear in everybody else, then I'm still working in that domination code. And so I need to remind myself, touch my heart, take a deep breath and lean back and look at the whole system again. So what the prophecies do is they prepare us for the moment to stand here now, and now they're instructing us. And what they're saying in this moment of instruction is that it's important to watch the ending as it falls down so we can stay informed, just like Ali said, but that we must focus on that which is breaking through. And that which is breaking through will be those individuals, those movements, those organizations that are embodying original principle of heart, reciprocity, collaboration, unity. All life is sacred. Those are the original principles of life, Mother, planted here in those original days. It's the foundation of all life, is seen and weaved through those original principles. So if we start to come towards where we're going and embrace this new dawn, they call it, this new 26,000-year cycle that's about to open itself with this intention of focus on unity for the first time. And that's its instruction. So when I start to hold things like that, then I don't go to an old way that I was colonized to think, a belief system that backed up that bad pattern. I don't go back into that space to find the answer to the time I'm standing in here now. So if I go back and say with some of the stakeholders, well, I'm not comfortable because we still got to harm some people because we got to do war or they're going to take our territory, then all of a sudden you're still in that old pattern of destruction, trying to find a solution or a reason why you need to keep hate alive and not peace. And for the UN, it was started with the idea of peace being a walking prayer, a walking movement, a walking intention. So I just want to, that's how our original caretakers would talk about some of this time, when each nation has their own origin story. And with those origin story come the instructions for the care of life in that territory. So they already have what we need to restore and regenerate life. They already have it, and they're needing a platform in order to be able to share it and be held in a safe way. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yes.
A bit of a crazy woman.
I know.
Could I add something to this, actually? Because I think it's really important. We talk and we invite and we want to have more of this global indigenous wisdom. Why? Because that is the wisdom that is unbroken. That is the wisdom that is still in the covenant with the whole of the equilibrium on this planet. The Western world, and I mean that not, I mean that in terms of like culturally speaking, this is fairly recent. This way of thinking, this Cartesian, this Darwinist, this, separation paradigm approach, this is fairly recent. This has proven, people love to talk about impact measurement. Well, look at the impact measurement now. Literally every single measure that can demonstrate whether this culture is working or not is showing us that it's not working because it's destroying everything. So indigenous knowledge and wisdom is needed now because we need to remember what we are here for. And we need to remember that we are not here to wage war, essentially. We are here as a walking prayer for peace. So, even in the language that we use, and something that somebody said yesterday, people will say, to have the killer instinct. Now, what we need is the warrior instinct, because the warrior protects. Violence is inevitable in some instances and in some places, but we don't have to choose violence to answer a particular problem. I had a Ridgeback many years ago. Like, Ridgebacks are incredibly big dogs. And the vet at the time told me, she said, "You realize that they're an alpha breed?" I said, "Yes." "So do you realize what it means for you?" Like, "I don't know." It's like, these dogs respond to respect. And the minute you start raising your voice or you lose it, and if you want to use violence, they will not respect you, because that means you're not alpha. When you use violence, you've already lost any kind of control over yourself and any kind of self-respect, let alone respect for anybody else. So when we see violence, what we know is that these are communities of human beings who have lost complete self-respect for life. for their own life, for the life of everything else. So for us as a community, I'm going to go back to what my daughter said to me a couple of nights ago when I was, a bit depressed about the state of the world. And she said, well, she said, when people say power to the people, it's like power is something that is given or that it can be taken, but it's not. When we say power to the people, what we mean is that the people are the power. The people are the power.
Mm.
Because I said to her, I feel like I'm just a tiny ant and I can't do much. She said, well, ants work together.
Oh, she's
right?
so wise. She's so
Exactly.
wise.
So,
Yes.
because everything that we're saying now for those who are in this very corporate, mechanistic, paradigm might think, what's it got to do with me? How do I put this in practice and in application in my day to day? Well, Jyoti said it. Take a step back and look at yourself first, because you literally are the power. We power the system. It's not about grand gestures and doing like the big things. We do the big things together, but individually, we each have to take that step. So in the way that right now we are talking to each other, when we are going to go to bed and when we are going to get up, who do we choose to be? These decisions, these moments, they matter. If you choose to help your neighbor, you are doing something. And then the movement grows. Ants build, what did you say? Ants build empires together. So what it means, like, we can effect change together. So seek out, members, or seek out the communities that want to be the change. Go with like-minded people who want to be the change, not people who agree with you, but people who agree with the vision of the world that we want to manifest together through peace. And then all of our differences will make a difference if we can work in harmony with each other, because we were not supposed to be the same at any point. We were always supposed to harmonize with each other. We're like a melody, the way that Jyoti described the earth in terms of its cycle. It's a wave. So together we have to harmonize.
I love this. Bringing back hope to all of us through understanding that we have the agency and we're creating the systems we are living in and that are governing us. And I would like to come back a little bit to the origin of also this podcast. How can the UN actually become, again, this inspiration and this hope for people, this platform where are these beautiful values that we talked about earlier: reciprocity, collaboration, human rights, also harmony, peace? How can it become this platform again, or how can we strengthen it while it is arguably sidelined in many of today's conflicts and funding is withdrawn at all levels from many member states? What needs to happen that it becomes this beacon of hope again for many and also gets this power back to enable this change or this environment? Big question.
It's a big question. I have the privilege of parenting, the next wave of human beings. And my responsibility in that sense is to make sure that they are well-rounded people and that they are autonomous and independent and that they can think for themselves and that they have a sense of purpose. And I suppose that's what I want to say about the UN here. How can that happen? And just to follow up on what Jyoti said, all of this, by the way, is coming together in my head, the children and the UN and Jyoti and all of that. Like, I'm looking at all of this. It's like intergenerational and interinstitutional in that sense. It's about purpose. The UN right now, I think, if it has lost its way, it's because it has lost its purpose. It's playing politics because of the people within the UN are playing politics. But within the UN, you have the guardians of the UN. And the guardians of the UN are the people who are keeping the UN alive. The people are the power. The people, to, echo what Jyoti said, have to come together in circles. The people within the UN, those who know the UN inside out, they are the ones who can effect the change. And it will start with small changes like, how do we make decisions today? Instead of doing the same old, same thing, how can we be different today? How can we if you step into your office one morning, instead of going like, okay, same thing, I'm going to do all of this, blah, 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 blah. It's asking yourself, by the end of the day, how can I be proud of myself? And how can I be proud of the UN today? And it doesn't have to be a big, massive thing. If it is, brilliant, but it doesn't have to. It starts with the small little waves, the small little drops, because this is the root level. If the people at the heart of those institutions are not themselves the embodiment of the purpose and of the values, then the whole institution will not be. If the UN has lost its shine, it's because the people at the heart of the UN have lost their own enchantment about it, possibly. It is about re-enchanting yourself about the work that you're doing. When you joined the UN, you joined for a purpose. You joined for a reason. You believe in those missions, but let's believe in them by not being robotic about it. It is, if the UN is a garden, how do you want to cultivate the UN? You're the gardener.
Every day that my own contribution matters, and the quality of this contribution can have a ripple effect in my team, in whatever emails I'm writing, in the projects I'm supervising. That's all that matters. And if all of us remember, then the UN can really find back to its original purpose and its original power and influence and impact in the world. I strongly believe it. It resonates so much, and it really, I feel like it's empowering me already just to think about it, or inspiring me.
Yeah. Could I add something about this? Because what you just said is a reminder. You know, Polly Higgins, the godmother of ecocide. She wrote this book, Dare to be Great. And in it, she really retraces how she got inspired about it. She calls us, she invites us to be great. She dares us to be great. And what she means by that, it's not, a delusion of grandeur or an egotistical approach. What she means is that remember that you are part of something greater than yourself. And so when you look at the UN, a friend of mine reminded me as well about man's search for meaning. I'm forgetting the name of the author, unfortunately, but he wrote it when he came out of the Nazi camp during the Holocaust. And from his book, what he noticed was those who lost that sense of purpose were the ones who would give up on life. And those who had a greater vision, who felt that they were part of something that was greater than themselves, they tended to survive. So what this means is, to me, is quite simple. Are you walking into your job to clock in and clock out? Or are you walking in to make a difference? Whatever the level might be for that difference, And
I wondered, can we just maybe ask you why we should not lose hope, and what any of us can do to hopefully reimagine this new UN in a new world?
Well, I would just thank you for all the good questions that helped us dive into a transparent conversation today, because this is what gives me hope. That we can kind of sit down with our kids, with the youth, the ones that are bringing the seeds of the next possibility that's about to be planted. And it's up to us to make sure that they have a path for that to occur on. So this kind of transparent dialogue amongst all of us, where we can really just get our courage up and just jump out here and let's just talk about what's really going down, and what are we receiving that might help us understand and take full authority for the thread that we carry from our own ancestral root to this moment in time, and declare it at the world table, and then give thanks because our original caretakers are there to guide through Mother Earth how that tapestry gets woven with each of the threads from our roots, bringing visible the new dawn. So I hope we can keep having these kinds of discussions, and because this gives, and they say, unless the grandmother's heart gets on the ground, then you've got a problem when the grandmother's heart's on the ground. But I can tell you, I'm walking with a lot of really marching grannies, and our hearts are definitely not on the ground. They are leading us into our new becoming.
Beautiful. What a beautiful vision. And good to have all the grandmothers on our side, on our back. Ali, any last final closing words from your side?
Yes, I would say, change the music, essentially, the narratives that we keep on hearing about despair and that nothing can work, change that disc, change the music, disc, I'm old fashioned now, it looks like, shuffle, shuffle and change the tune. But essentially, yeah, change the tune, Exactly. Change the track. Thank you. Change the track and actually change tracks. If you change the track, you will change track. And, hope for me, and it may not be the case for a lot of people, but certainly for me, hope is usually when I feel despair. When I feel better, I have faith. And if I don't have faith in anything else, I always have faith in love. I love my children. I love my family. I am loved. I am cherished. This is what I remember because this is what life is all about. So, there are two things that I say to myself when I have a decision to make or when I want to get up and do something about things. And the first one is always with death as my witness. If today was my last day, what would I choose to do? What would I choose to be? And that tells me what matters. Because frankly, if today was my last day, I know exactly where I would be, who I would be with, what I would be doing. So I know whether what I am about to do, what I'm doing right now matters or not. And so that's my sacred no, and it's what matters. And then the second question is, and that's my eldest who gave that to me. She said, it's all very well thinking about death, but what about life? It's like, yeah, with life as my witness, who do I choose to become to thrive? If it was my first day on earth, just like when we were kids, you wake up in the morning and every day feels like it's a brand new day and you feel joyful and you just want to enjoy it. What would you choose to become to enjoy and thrive in this life? Hope.
Beautiful questions. And thank you both for sharing all this very inspiring wisdom with me and with our listeners. And I truly hope this will instill some hope in the hearts of our listeners and to my colleagues. And I can't wait to continue this conversation and see what 2026 is going to bring us. Will be exciting. Let's reconnect then and take stock.
That'd be wonderful.
Thank you so much.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, it would be. Thank you so much, Silke.
Thank you, Silke, for your good work, and Ali always.
Jyoti. Always.
So much love. Thank you both.